we are just going to start a little early, just getting me together, giving that a minute, letting everybody and me get my life together. It's been a little finicky. Okay, perfect. It's doing the thing it's supposed to. Don't we love it when things are doing what they're supposed to? All right, so we're just on for a few minutes before we get started at 8:30. So thank you guys for your patience. It'll give everybody time to hop on and everything like that as well. So I hope everybody's doing well this morning. Let's see, things to talk. We're in March now, depending on when you're watching this. So what does that mean? It means nesting season has started. I don't know if you've been out at like 7 o'clock in the morning and just gone outside. Everybody is singing, whether it's bluebirds, chickadees, wrens, and cardinals. It's just chatter. So compared to the winter time when it's kind of quiet, everybody is now really a cacophony of noise when they go outside, which is really fun. So they're all singing and trying to get ready for nesting and raising young as well. So if you have any nest boxes, make sure you get those set and together. If you haven't checked any previously up until now, I know I checked mine. I have one nest box in my yard, and I checked mine last week, and I didn't have anything, and I checked this week, and I've got a chickadee that's starting to make a nest. So clearly he's beaten out the bluebirds, so we're going to see how they do and who ends up with the nest box finally. So good morning, good morning. We're just waiting until 8:30 real quick. I hope you're doing well today. Thanks so much for hopping on. I really appreciate it. Let me see. So nesting season has started, and people keep asking about hummingbirds. Usually for North Carolina, it's going to be about whether it's early April to mid-April. So that's definitely going to be a time. So be ready for that. We're not quite there yet. Good morning, Monica. Let's see. You've got a pair of northern mockingbirds gathering nesting material. Oh, that's so fun. They're honestly, I'm really excited to talk about them today. They've got like they've got sassy attitude, but two, there's a lot of really fun behaviors that they partake in, and it's really fun to observe them as well. So I hope they have a good nesting season this year for you. That's very exciting. So yeah, basically keep an eye out for that. There's going to be a lot of birds nesting, so just be prepared and be on the lookout. It's going to be a lot of fun as well too. Oh, and that's my alarm. Goodness, did I forget to turn off my alarm? Okay. Well, if my alarm goes off a second time, we're going to know we're in trouble. All right, so it's 8:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Jolene. I'm a certified songbird feeding specialist with Wild Birds Unlimited of Concord. And today we're going to be talking about the northern mockingbird, who's a very common visitor in a lot of parks, more urban or open areas, and definitely a lot of neighborhoods as well. So chances are you've seen these birds more than you may have thought if you haven't heard of them before. So I hope you guys are ready to learn a lot about them. I'm ready to talk about them. If you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment. I will do my best to kind of pay attention to that as we go along. So with that, we're going to jump right into it. So something that is fun is that mockingbirds are in the family Mimidae. So their closest relatives also include catbirds and thrashers. For those that don't know, catbirds are also a mimic. And like the mockingbird's name, they mimic or mock a lot of other sounds that they use in their vocalization. So we'll talk a lot about that shortly as well. Their range is actually really large. So this purple area all across the US, a little bit of Canada, a lot of Mexico, and some of Cuba and other portions of the Caribbean is that purple range. That's their year-round range. So they can be found there throughout the year. They are partial migrants depending on food availability. So whether or not you have them year-round or they shuffle kind of back and forth between your yard and somewhere else depends on the resources for that year. So it does kind of vary. But these birds do prefer more of an open habitat with a few trees, maybe some shrubs, but not a lot of lower story undergrowth, some scarce vegetation. And again, they can be found in some nice suburban areas. Neighborhoods are very common, garden areas, parks, mowed lawns. Those are all areas that they will take advantage of as well too. The oldest recorded on record for a mockingbird was 14 years and 10 months old. Again, through those banding practices where they band the bird, release it, and if they capture it later on, they record the original banding date and where it was located as well. When it comes to identification, these birds may look very simple, but they've got some key factors which it makes it very easy to know who you're looking at. These are definitely medium-sized birds. I kind of associate them very similar to robin size, except they're a bit more slender, not as round as a robin is. And they're just a little bit lanky, whether it's their tail, their beak, their legs. It's just kind of, they've just got that lanky look. So their beak is a little bit longer. The top of it is curved slightly, but it's nothing grand like some other thrashers or wrens, for example. So just a little bit longer there. Their wings are on the shorter end and they're very round, which kind of gives their tail a longer appearance as well. And with the way that they walk around and how they move, it does look like they have kind of longer legs as well. So they've just got that lanky appearance. Their colors may not have a lot to them, but they definitely count. So these birds are more of a gray-brown coloration. They're darker on the back, definitely darker on the wings and on the top of the head as well. On the belly, they kind of have more pale coloration, so it lightens up just a little bit. And one area that is absolutely distinct for these birds is the wing bar that they have on their wings. So when their wings are closed, you have this small white wing bar here, but when they are in flight, you cannot mistake a mockingbird because that little wing bar becomes a giant white flash eventually in flight as well. So when you see them moving, you almost always see that characteristic. So it makes them very easy to identify, which I love. It's always fun when you have like a really distinct factor that makes it easy to see which one they are. Now, of course, along with those factors, there are a lot of vocalizations, and they sing a lot throughout the year. So with many birds, oftentimes they may have 1 to 3, maybe 4 songs that they pick from. A lot of the times it's going to be 1 to 2. Mockingbirds are different. They can learn over 150 different sounds, sometimes going up to 200 as they get older, that they will utilize in their repertoire from year to year. This can be anything from local sounds that they've heard in their area, whether it's other songbird vocalizations, things like squeaky gate hinges, sirens, barking dogs. They can have a variety of sounds that they create, and they're very good at it, which is always really cool. These birds sing through 3/4 of the year. So February through August is a primary time, and then a little bit in September and November as well, too. And the thing is, not every mockingbird will, again, sing the same song. They do different styles depending on what they hear, and they won't use the same repertoire every year. So let's say last spring, they had a certain lineup of noises that they really enjoyed to use or sounds they like to make. They're going to take only 30 to 60% of those those sounds that they made last year and incorporate that into next year while adding some new songs or maybe adding a slightly different pattern to it. So there is variation each year that they do it, which is really cool. For the most part, the males are going to be singing the most often. They're usually the ones that set up the territory and kind of state where they are with their singing. So unpaired males that have not found a partner yet are going to sing the most often, and they will sing relentlessly. So if you're in an area which has artificially lit areas at night, so parks or parking lots, you will hear these birds singing throughout the night up to like 11 o'clock at night. So they're definitely very determined. Females sing less often, if at all. So they don't sing as much in the summer. They might sing a little bit more in the fall, but your very chatty mockingbirds are often going to be your males. Now, in this case, I've got 2 videos to show the example of how different repertoires can vary. So with one mockingbird, let's see if I can turn it. Yeah, you've got not a mockingbird, a woodpecker noise mixed in with those kinds of noises. So what you're going to notice with mockingbirds is they often perform the same song maybe 2 to 3 times before switching gears to a different noise. And they're very good at it. They, honestly, if you use Merlin ID or anything like that, they definitely can throw that identification off because it sounds exactly like the real thing. And my bird identification by ear is varied, but that last one, I think I heard like a robin, a wren, potentially like a red shoulder, and different noises that it may hear in its surrounding environment. This one is a different mockingbird. There is some wind that you can hear a little bit, and there's red-winged blackbirds in the distance, but try and kind of hear the difference in the two different styles of vocalizations as well here. But as you can kind of see, they both employ different types of noises depending on their preference. So again, not everyone is going to utilize the same style, and they're all going to have like their favorite noises. But definitely really interesting to see what songs or patterns they repeat and how often they do so as well. So just really fun options, but there's usually spacing in between when they make those behaviors or make those vocalizations as well. When it comes to their diet, these birds are actually omnivorous. So they do take advantage of a few different types of food options, anything from insects to seeds and fruits. Insects they focus heavily on in the spring and summertime, just because they're heavily available and it's great protein, especially for their young. While in the wintertime, they focus heavily on fruits as well. So you will find them in areas that have a lot of different available fruits, such as juniper or hollies or things like that as well. They focus heavily on the fruits in the wintertime, and because they eat so much fruit, these birds actually help heavily with seed dispersal, because obviously when a seed goes in, the actual sprout has to go somewhere, and it just goes right through. So that'll land somewhere else and just kind of help with that plant growth as well. Usually with a lot of their foraging strategies, they're pretty straightforward. They often walk, run, or hop along the ground, so they're more ground foragers than anything, but you can have some that will drop forage like bluebirds do, so they'll pick a perch somewhere. When they see an insect on the ground, they'll hop down, grab it, and then go back up as well. So there's a few different strategies that they employ there, and they have no problem foraging throughout the day. Some birds like to forage more in the morning and in the evening. Mockingbirds, you can see them throughout, especially in midday. And again, if there's an area with lighting that provides artificial light at night, you will find them in those areas foraging as well too. One thing that they do as well that you can kind of see both as a foraging strategy and as a territorial display is something called a wing flash. So this behavior is really fun. I just like the way it looks. It's essentially a kind of ratcheting behavior where these birds will open up their wings in a very kind of stunted motion and basically display that wing bar and have everything open. And we've seen it both as a foraging strategy where scientists believe that when they open up their wings, it kind of startles insects to move, so it makes it easier to spot. And they've also sometimes noticed it in territorial displays. So whether that's just showing that they're in the area or trying to beat like other potential threats or predators in the area, I'm not really sure. It's one of those things where it's kind of used in both scenarios. Female mockingbirds will do this display after they return to the nest after an extended period of time of absence as well. So it's kind of done in a mixed style there as well. So that can be used both as they forage and for those territorial displays. Oftentimes during the spring season and some of the winter, we may have noticed, or you may have had the treat of dealing with a mockingbird either at your feeders or in your yard. And these birds are especially territorial. Males will often establish the territory first in spring or in fall, and they will kind of sing to announce their territory and to try and attract potential mates as well. One other behavior that's really interesting during this time of year is a boundary dance, too. Let me find the right one here. Okay. So boundary dances occur between two males that are in neighboring territories. Basically, they will meet up in an open area of vegetation. They will kind of stand really straight, face each other head on, and kind of just go back and forth, kind of eyeing each other up. And I've got one more video that's really fun for that as well, because this one's in slow motion, and I love slow motion behaviors. But essentially, they've got that vertical posture. They're kind of keeping an eye on each other, and sometimes they will just kind of continue to go in circles or go throughout that kind of boundary line or that location that they're kind of competing in. And it's a very quiet behavior. They don't make a lot of noise at this point in time, but when one of them does kind of lose or leave, that's when things start to get super chattery and everything as well. So of course they can also choose to grapple and stuff during this time, but it's a very interesting, simple behavior, at least to our eyes, that kind of helps keep that boundary in place and see who's winning. And good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me, because I see some people answered that in the chat. I really appreciate it. So definitely an interesting behavior to observe if you ever have the chance. And if you see it, it's just between some males that are competing against each other. Also, because they are very territorial, the male, of course, is super territorial, but when they do form a pair, the pair works together to defend that territory. So there's nothing quite as ferocious as two mockingbirds working together. Oftentimes, they will kind of keep other mockingbirds out of that area as well. Males will go against males, while females go against females, and they just kind of keep that area separate. Oftentimes, that summer territory is going to be larger than their winter territory. So they may not be as competitive over a wider range or as competitive as general in kind of the earlier winter season, depending on how focused they are on that territory. And they have no problem harassing things that are bigger than them, as you can kind of see from these two photos, which this right one with the red shoulder is my absolute favorite. They have no problem harassing hawks, other songbirds, dogs, cats, squirrels, anything that they find a problem in their territory. They have no problem kind of trying to swoop them out of the way. And while these birds are small and they are very aggressive, it's a lot of kind of there's not much contact made. It's basically just, hey, I'm here, move, and it's just very active movement to try and get them to get out of the way. So if you ever find yourself being harassed by a mockingbird, they aren't going to do just much damage. Just keep walking and they'll eventually stop. Of course, for a lot of us that feed our birds, we might also notice that this territorial behavior does encompass our bird feeders as well. So if over this past winter season you notice there was a lack of birds at your feeders, there is a chance that could have been because there is a mockingbird that is swooping in anytime other birds try and access the feeders. So they definitely cause a lot of slow activity because other birds know that mockingbirds are definitely very adamant about keeping other things out of their territory. We've had one in front of the store before that has definitely slowed things down in the feeding department, despite how many birds we have frequently coming to the feeder. So that is something that occur heavily in the kind of later winter season, sometimes in the fall, depends on, again, that territory that they're focusing on as well. So of course, before nesting season happens, they do have to find their partner for that season. So there are a few different courtship displays that I find really interesting. Of course, they do have courtship flights where the male will kind of chase the female as they fly together and exchange different types of calls. Flight displays are really interesting because this is basically when a male will find a good perch to settle from, and he'll kind of fly a few meters above the perch and hover before kind of parachuting down with open wings as just a courtship to show the females how they maneuver and everything as well. And then lastly, the males actually do take part in constructing the nest. And what they'll do is they'll construct multiple nests in their territory. And when a potential female stops by, he will kind of jump and show her those locations to see what she thinks. And if she does like one of those sites, she picks one and she'll actually finish the nest from there as well too. So it's really cool how they kind of work together on that. Let's see. Mary said, "Good morning. I have had a couple of mockingbirds that chase all the birds away from the feeders." Yeah, it's definitely a very common behavior this time of year. We heard a lot of it in January and February. So we'll be talking about how to kind of reduce that activity or the possible options to reduce it a little bit closer towards the end of the presentation. So stick around for that for sure. So yeah, when they do work on building the nest together, the female will finish the inner lining and some of the outside of the nest. They do have an open cup style nest with the outer portion, again, focusing kind of on larger smaller, larger dead twigs, while the inner is kind of made of grass, rootlets, and dead leaves. Because these birds are often found in like parks and neighborhoods and open areas, they will take advantage of human-made resources as well. So things like foil or plastic, Easter grass, or twine are all things that they may incorporate into their nests too. So again, the types of nesting material that birds utilize can sometimes help identify what type of nest it could potentially be as well, or whose nest it could be. So once the nest is finalized, these birds can have anywhere from 2 to 3 broods, depending on how successful the previous one was, and as well as resources in regards to food. But they have anywhere from 2 to 3 broods with 2 to 6 eggs. Usually these are kind of a blue-gray color or kind of a greenish-white, and the spotting, The extra spots and everything like that varies with individual, but it can either be like splotches or spots or scrawling that can be found in brown or red on the colors there as well. When it comes to like incubation and overall nesting period, it takes about 2 weeks to incubate the eggs, and then once they hatch, they are altricial young, so blind, naked, and defenseless. It takes another 2 weeks for them to officially fledge. So overall, depending on how long it takes for the nest to be built, you can have one brood essentially take 5 to 6 weeks to fledge the nest as well. So depending on how long that takes, and if they choose to nest again in that general area, they don't reuse the same nest. Sometimes you can be dealing with that length of time as how aggressive they can be with defending the feeders as well. The mockingbirds do work really well together to feed their young as well. Both parents will work on that. Usually they feed more heavily with insects and fruits. Insects, as the young are like newly hatched and definitely smaller, and as they get older, they'll switch over to a little bit more fruit as well too. I have one video that is a little pixelated, but it's still pretty fun. And somebody noticed that when the mockingbird came back to feed the young, right before the young pop up, there's a small like chirp noise that the adult makes to let them know that it's there. I don't know if you can hear it, but I just wanted to let you know that's why there's that delay, which is really fun. So we're gonna look at this real quick. So there's going to be a lot of that this season. So I hope you guys are ready, which is really fun. So they just have big, giant, yellow, gaping mouths, which is always very funny. And one thing that scientists did notice is it kind of is obvious once you hear it, but basically the better a male is at protecting its territory, the higher the nesting success rate is. So if you have a male that isn't able to defend its territory, chances are it's not as able to defend the young or any nestlings that develop, so the nesting success is a little bit lower. So they just noticed a correlation with that. So obviously how protective the males are is a big thing that the females are looking for when they choose where they want to nest, especially the territory that male has chosen as well in regards to resources. So once the young have fledged, they're not quite done growing yet. These birds technically leave the nest a little quote-unquote early. So it's not unsurprising. That's the word. Yeah, not unsurprising to see the mockingbirds kind of stick around or remain kind of grounded even though they fledged from the nest. So usually newly fledged mockingbirds look something like the picture on the right, where they have a shorter tail, they've got a lot of those downy tufts on their head, and they also have a nice speckled breast that's a little bit different from the adult mockingbirds. Basically, these birds are young and dumb because they've just fledged from a nest. They don't know anything else about what to do and what's going on, and they're still working on getting the flight muscles they need in order to actually fly effectively. So usually they'll stay around in the surrounding shrubs, kind of getting their bearings, while the parents watch from nearby and feed them as they continue to grow. So they are capable of flying within 8 days of leaving the nest, and after that kind of period as well. So especially if we're dealing with fledglings this time of year, if you notice a young bird that's kind of sitting around, kind of looking around, bright, alert, responsive, but on the ground in the middle of nowhere, that doesn't necessarily mean anything's wrong. That's very normal behavior for fledglings. So unless you notice very kind of lethargic behavior or bleeding or flies or anything like that, you don't need to intervene unless you see any of those things. So it's a very common behavior. Just know that usually the parents are somewhere nearby, even if you can't see them. So watch and wait before acting if you are concerned about anything going on. But once these birds are capable of flight, they are independent after about 3 more weeks of going with the parents. And sometimes they can look like this, because again, I mentioned they're a little young and dumb, which we love that. Everything has to grow and learn, right? So this is just a good example of what some of that behavior can look like. This is a juvenile. His tail has grown out, but he still has that speckling on the belly. He is trying to grab fruit. He hasn't mastered the trick yet, but that is why the parents are still around to help give them a helping hand as they figure things out as well too. So it's a lot of fun to kind of watch this process as they learn and grow as well. So really quick, we're going to talk about both how to attract and how to repel, because Both are fun and can lead to interesting behaviors as well. So, first off, we talked about how mockingbirds are omnivorous, so there are a lot of foods that they will go for. Things like suet are kind of at the top of their list. So, whether you use suet cakes, cylinders, plugs, bark butter, what you spread on the trees, or bark butter bits, they'll kind of go for any of those options. They're usually very popular with that. Suet can be used year round. There are no melt styles that have higher melting points that you can use well in the summer versus those that you use in the winter that are a little bit more greasy that have lower melting points. We've switched to no melt right now because the temperatures are all over the place and getting warmer as we go. Mealworms are also a great option for them. These birds like dried or live mealworms. Dried mealworms are freeze dried. They're very easy to keep in a bag in your pantry or wherever you keep your bird food items. Live mealworms do require being kept in the fridge to kind of keep them hibernating so that they're not as busy and don't turn into beetles anytime soon. So that is always an option. The nutrition levels are very similar. Main thing is if you have live mealworms, just kind of keeping them fed with a good baby carrot or two, carrots, potatoes, things like that. Vegetables are great options for them. You can also offer fruit to mockingbirds as well. Fruit, again, is one of those where it's a little bit higher maintenance to keep track of. So it really depends on how invested you are in trying different food items. You can use fresh or dried fruit, whether you have that fruit in a seed blend or a cylinder or anything like that. But you can use fresh fruit as well in like a cup feeder. Just keep in mind, we don't want any of the food to ferment. And also, they are used to, see, they're used to fruit being on trees and plants and things like that. It's slightly different presentation in like a cup or a cup feeder or anything. So don't be surprised if it takes them more time to get used to. If you offer fruits, you can do anything from grapes, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries. The choice is yours. It does not hurt to have these items to make it easier for the birds to carry, because of course you can have situations where they will try a whole blackberry and really give it a whirl. And sometimes we can just make that easier for them if you ever choose to do fruit as well. And of course, these birds will also go for deshelled sunflower or deshelled peanuts. Peanuts you can use whether it's raw, roasted, or unsalted. Those are all good options for peanuts in general. And black oil sunflower, deshelled, is usually what they'll go for as well. And because they are slightly larger birds, feeders that have a larger tray or a larger perching option are going to be best. So tray feeders or hopper feeders, you can do seed tubes if they have that larger tray, or you can do seed cylinders as well, and they have no problem with those as well. Now, from this list, I've just announced a lot of things that they really enjoy, which limits the things that they won't go for, of course, which does make that complicated sometimes if you're having the behavior where mockingbirds are kind of have taken over the feeders. And again, this can kind of look like a behavior where you see absolutely nothing at your feeders anytime you look, but it turns out when you're not watching, there's a bird that tries to come in and a mockingbird will just swoop in and kind of keep them away. So they can get very territorial at these sections. So what do we do? There's a few options, and again, nothing is going to make the mockingbird leave. Sometimes they will kind of get tired of certain things and kind of head out, but basically we want to keep the peace so that the mockingbird is happy and our other birds can still kind of enjoy the feeders as well. Very territorial birds don't happen super often at the feeders, but what is one other bird that can be very territorial at our feeders in the summertime? Hummingbirds. And everybody loves hummingbirds. So something, if you've ever dealt with hummingbirds, is that the males can also be super territorial. And that's, again, just how they instinctually work. That is a feeding resource that is great for nesting, so they will take advantage of that as well. One of the best ways to kind of keep hummingbirds from taking over just one feeder is to divide and conquer. Offer two feeders in slightly different locations, maybe on opposite sides of the house, somewhere out of view. So it basically makes it harder for that hummingbird to guard both locations, right? It is the same concept with mockingbirds as well. Basically, if you have all your feeders on one feeding station, it does not hurt to move one, or you can kind of split a few of them. It depends on what resources you have and how much room you have, but even just one feeder, it doesn't hurt to move it to the opposite side of the house or a different location. And what that will do is it makes it harder for the mockingbird to guard both areas successfully. It takes a lot more energy, and sometimes they will try to find a better perching point to do both, but it does sometimes give your birds an extra second or two to kind of get in there and get the food they want to before the mockingbird pops by. You can also basically offer a sacrifice to the mockingbird and get some of its favorite food that you notice it's going for, or its favorite feeder, and put that closer to like the mockingbird's lookout area. So if you know they are staying perched at a certain location, you can offer its favorite food closer to it in a hope to kind of get it to pay attention on that resource as well. So dividing and conquering is probably the easier strategy of what you can employ to kind of reduce that mockingbird behavior. Some other styles are kind of switching up this behavior as well. You can try and reduce the foods that you have in the feeders that the mockingbird would enjoy. So you can try offering safflower in like some of your feeders, because safflower has a three-sided tough shell that it may not be interested in. So you can kind of split up those areas. So again, if you have safflower in one feeder and maybe offering a different food in another feeder, that kind of makes it where the mockingbird has to focus on one, and maybe you can get your other birds such as cardinals, house finches, chickadees, titmice, doves focusing on that safflower instead. So again, we're just kind of playing a game of seeing where we can get the mockingbird to go. Lastly, if you really just don't want the mockingbird touching that food at all, there are different types of seed tubes or seed cylinder cages that you can kind of put around your feeder as well. They have like the 1.5-inch diameter openings that you can kind of utilize that let in your smaller birds. Anything smaller than a cardinal can go through these types of cages. And that is something that the mockingbirds don't always like either. So you can kind of put that around one of your feeders and still offer that more open feeder for your larger birds, or potentially for the mockingbird, to kind of give them different options. Again, the easiest strategy is probably trying to separate your feeders where possible, because it's very much like a hummingbird situation. But the other styles can potentially make that behavior happen a little more often. And again, chances are the mockingbird will still be around, and every year is different. I don't know about you, but at least in the front of the store where we have that one mockingbird that's very territorial, a few years back we had one year where he kept the feeders empty for months and he would not let any other bird come by. And then eventually he stopped. All of our birds came back and we didn't have that issue for like another year or so. Eventually he did come back, but he's been a little bit friendly this time, so he hasn't been as disruptive at the feeders, and maybe a little bit of sass here and there, but nothing is major. So keep in mind these behaviors are temporary. Sometimes they can last a few months, which can be really obnoxious. You can also try taking your feeders in for a few weeks and seeing if that deters the mockingbird from picking your territory. There's different strategies that you can kind of choose as to what works best for you, which can kind of help with this as well. But basically, we're just trying to keep the peace and make everybody happy so we can still enjoy our birds during this time of year as well. So if you ever have any questions on any of that, definitely feel free to give us a call and we'll try and help you walk through different options and what would work best for you as well. With that said, that is kind of all I have to offer today, so I hope you found that really interesting, because I know I did. The videos that people recorded and posted to Macaulay Library are always fantastic, and I always appreciate having those available and sharing them with you guys, which is awesome. So definitely feel free to check out Macaulay Library in general to see different resources, videos, audio, photos that people have posted from birds around the world. All About Birds is also a great resource. If you ever want to learn more about a specific bird, you can type that in, and they've got great resources in regards to just general information about habitat, location, range, sound, audio. Sound and audio are the same thing, but you get the idea. They've got a lot of different things there as well. For those that are looking to shop today, feel free when you come in, or if you want to do a phone order, to mention the code Mockingbird to get $5 off a $25 purchase or more, either in-store or through phone order, available today as well. And we're doing a second viewing of this presentation at 11 in store, in case you know anybody that you want to, oh my goodness, let them know that we're doing that today. We also move these presentations to YouTube later in the day as well. So if somebody doesn't have Facebook and you want to show this to somebody else, that'll be on our YouTube channel, Wild Birds Unlimited of Concordancy. So feel free to check that out as well. We also post previous presentations in case you ever missed out. You have nothing better to do and want to check that out as well. So thank you all so much for coming, not coming in, but like, checking out the presentation today. I really appreciate it. It makes a world of difference, the fact that you guys pop in and actually listen to the end as well. Really, it really helps, and thank you so much. So best of luck with your mockingbirds if you see them. Have fun with nesting season in general. It should be a busy one. And with that, I hope you guys enjoy your day and your weekend. I will see you guys next time. Have a great day. Bye.